stand on the other song.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Episode 597. It's Wednesday, November 13th, 2013, 9 p.m. Pacific Time. Internet talk radio for your imagination. Mike Matthews broadcasting from the last place on Earth located somewhere in Podcastro Valley, California. Today, Chely Shoehart, Floyd the Floorman, John Deere the engineer, plus the finale of my Into an interview with Nick Siekierski, archivist at the Hoover Institution.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
That's at Stanford University, if I forgot to mention.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
On another topic, I'm so glad to see Blockbuster has bit the dust. They were so freaking annoying standing around and fining all of us for not bringing in our videos on time. I once had to pay $50. I'm not lying. And that's all I have to say.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Except, my mom had a video store for a long time, and Blockbuster basically put her out of business. So I am so happy
Daily
to see them go away.
Podcast.
And that Netflix is here.
Yeah!
Because Netflix allows me to see things like the very funny comedian Aziz Ansari. I'm so sorry. Aziz is so funny. He's 30 years old. He's got this latest comedy special called Buried Alive, which is free, of course, on Netflix. Well, you have to pay for Netflix, but anyway, you can watch it, and he is going off about how he's 30 years old and all his friends are getting married and having kids, and he just laughs at them. And that's how I was at 30. And then, 4 years later, I got married. So we'll see how that goes for Mr. AA and see how he lasts. It's sometime around, and I was like somebody who really held out. All my high school friends, whom I'm still friends with on Facebook, most of them got married right out of freaking high school. These people having kids. They got kids older than me now. Idiots. Oh, look who just walked in.
Hello, Mike Matthews. Chely Shoehart, the job supervisor, and I've got a lot of piercings and tattoos.
Yeah, your generation likes to do that. Actually, in the 90s, people were starting to get tattoos and piercings. You know that tattoo you got there, Chely.
What tattoo? You don't see it.
That's right, I don't, because you have it hidden in a place that I probably will never find out, hopefully. But yeah, you have. So, when you get older, things start to happen to that tattoo. My dad had a friend who was he got a tattoo when he was in the Navy back in the 40s. And by the time he hit his 70s, that tattoo looked like a elephant on him.
Okay, Mike Matthews, I didn't need to hear that.
Why do you even get tattoos and piercings?
Because my hero, Miley Cyrus, got them.
Who gives a crap about Miley Cyrus? It's all about her dad. Forget about Achy Breaky Heart. That guy did some great music. In the heart of a woman.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Most people don't either. Look who else just walked in. Hello, Mike. This is Floyd the Floorman.
And this is John Deere the engineer. I know what you're talking about. I listened to that Billy Ray Cyrus album.
You did?
Yeah, my name is John Deere, so, I have been on a tractor which has had a tape player in it, which happened to have a Billy Ray Cyrus tape in it.
Ah, how interesting.
Not really, but that was the last country cassette I think that was ever made, was Billy Ray Cyrus's album.
Some Gave All?
That's the one, Mike. I know it very well.
Sometimes I have him dress up as a cowboy and sing it to me, because I'm Floyd the Floorman. How cute. So this is an interesting historic milestone. The U.S. oil production, yes, oil production here in the U.S., is another way of saying it, reached a milestone in October. The United States produced more crude oil in October than it imported for the first time since early 1995.
Ironically, that's when the last Billy Ray Cyrus album came out.
Ironically, indeed. I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, so what? That's amazing, incredible. Why is this happening? Domestic shale oil output continued to surge and U.S. consumption of petroleum products remained relatively flat. The figures mark a milestone in the rebound of U.S. oil production since drillers started using a combination of horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing to unlock oil previously trapped in layers of shale rock in states such as North Dakota and Texas, according to the WashingtonPost.com. At the same time, gains in automobile fuel efficiency and other areas have been curbing U.S. oil consumption. And someone who I have interviewed on this podcast, Mr. John Graves, who you can find in the interview section on the website mikesdailypodcast.com. He wrote a book recently about fracking, and he actually pointed this out, that this would happen. Even though I was telling him, fracking's bad, okay? And he was like, this is my book I've written, and this is what's going to happen. So the trend is expected to continue for another decade as U.S. domestic oil supplies grow and reliance on imports shrinks, easing one of the main sources of pressure on global oil markets. However, the U.S. remains the world's biggest oil-consuming nation and the largest importer of crude oil. Interestingly enough, China is the world's biggest importer of crude oil and refined petroleum products combined. Moreover, global crude oil prices remain high by historic measures. Some oil analysts note that prices would be even higher without the increase in U.S. production, which has helped offset oil disruptions in Libya, Iraq, Nigeria, and sanctions on Iran.
Mike Matthews, Aziz Ansari is really funny.
Yeah, he is. So what do you think about this fracturing? People hate fracking. I kind of like the fact that we're using less oil than we used to. What do you think of it being 1995 all over again? Email me, mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. Oh, look, there's Melissa Etheridge. She is really popular again. No, she's not. Email me, mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. We read your comments on the section emails from email. Also email me there if you'd like to be a guest on the show or if you'd like to sponsor the show, mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. Check out the website, mikesdailypodcast.com, where I have my blog and the daily podcast picture. Oh, and there's all these cool links there, including the link to our Facebook page. Like the Facebook page, and when I post a new show, share that with your friends so that more people find out about the show. There's also an iTunes link, and subscribe to us there. If you do that and comment and rate the show there, more people will find out about us too that way. Another great way to support the show is the Amazon deal of the day. That's right there on the website. Click on that and buy something that helps support the show. Also supporting the show is checking out our Twitter and Yelping about us. On Yelp, we're on Yelp. There's links to where to find us there at mikesdailypodcast.com, as well as links to where to find us on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All there at mikesdailypodcast.com. Yeah, it's cool.
It's only cool if it has tattoos and piercings, and it looks like Miley Cyrus.
And does that include Billy Ray Cyrus, since he's related by blood?
No.
Into an interview.
We're talking with Nick Siekierski, the guy with the coolest name ever. And he is talking to me via Skype. And we are discussing, yesterday we were talking about Herbert Hoover, and today we're going to talk about stuff kind of concerning Herbert Hoover, because Nick works at Stanford, not Stanton, which we cleared that yesterday, clarified that. But you put together like museum pieces, exhibits, that kind of thing.
That's right. That's right. So I work at the Hoover Institution Library and Archives at Stanford, and we're for anyone who didn't listen yesterday, we're a public policy think tank and also a library and archives focused on 20th century history. So we have a museum that's right next door to the Hoover Tower. So if you're ever at Stanford, come and drop by. The museum is open Tuesday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. when we have an exhibit up, and that's usually most of the year. I can talk about our latest one. It's called The Art and History, Treasures from the Hoover Library and Archives, and it's just a collection of various art-related materials that we have in our archives. For example, we have paintings from the Russian Revolution. There was one of our first Hoover curators. A curator is like a specialist in a given subject area. Back in the 20s, this guy named Frank Golder, he worked for Hoover, and he collected these paintings by this guy named Ivan Vladimirov. Vladimirov was a propaganda painter, but Golder saw a unique opportunity to commission him to paint some paintings, which were quite different from the propaganda that he was used to painting. It showed different scenes from revolutionary Russia, how the elites were living, in like terrible conditions after the Bolsheviks took power. You have, buildings being destroyed, or banks being looted, or stores being looted, all kinds of, different dark scenes from the revolution. And he painted these scenes for Golder. Golder paid for it with his own money. And he was actually worried, Vladimirov, the artist, because he thought that if the Bolsheviks found out that he was doing all of these kinds of artworks, that he might get in trouble, or even worse. So he asked Golder that if he was going to display these paintings in the West, to have his name covered up. So we still have little like pieces of tape or paper that cover up some of his signatures on some of the paintings that we've displayed. So that's just one example. We have, talking about Herbert Hoover, we have thousands of letters of appreciation that were sent to him by people in Europe after World War I, because they knew how much he had done for them, the humanitarian relief that he had provided as head of the American Relief Administration. So we have these like beautifully hand-drawn letters with, the American eagle on it, the American flag, and thank you America from all the different kids and in the different languages, photos and signatures and all of that. So that's just a couple of art-related items that we have in this current exhibit. And the exhibits are once or twice a year. I think we're moving to twice a year now. And they focus on different history topics. Sometimes it's more documents. Sometimes it's more, photographs. We have a huge poster collection. We have over 100,000 different posters, different political posters. Wow. Of course, posters were a very important communications medium, throughout the 20th century. So we have a huge collection of those. And so all these things get somehow selected. We choose a theme, and every exhibit represents a new part of our collections.
Oh, can I see any of those political posters as part of your exhibit now?
There are some. It's less politics for this exhibit, but the next exhibit that we're going to have in February is going to be on the fall of the Berlin Wall and the different revolutions that happened in Eastern Europe in 1989, all the democratic revolutions. So that's going to feature a lot of posters.
Wow. Now, Vladimirov, what eventually happened to him? Do you know anything about his...
So I think he just lived out his life in Russia. I don't think anything bad happened to him, luckily. But we do have the fruits of his labor, which show a different, dramatic portrait of what life was like in Russia at the time.
I would love to see those. I mean, what a fascinating time that was. And the rise of communism, right, and all that, and the
yeah. Well, just speaking of Frank Golder for a minute again, he was a professor here at Stanford. He was a specialist in Russia. That was his what he knew most about Russian history. He traveled there, I believe it was 4 or 5 times, and he sent back these reports along with his basic letters back to the Hoover Institution, since he was part of the American Relief Administration humanitarian mission to Russia in the early 20s, which helped feed millions of people, and really was a huge effort at the time. But at the same time, he was collecting historical documents for the Hoover Institution, and his reports that he sent back were considered some of the best analysis of the situation on the ground in Russia at the time, because he was a specialist. He knew Russian, of course. He had contacts there. He saw the dramatic changes between when he was there before the revolution and then after the revolution. So he's the one we can credit for having such awesome Russian collections here at Hoover, which we've continued to build on. But the foundation of that aspect of our collections is thanks to Frank Golder, and then of course, other curators, other specialists over the decades who've collected materials and then brought them here. And then my job is that I get to display them in our museum.
Yeah, so how do you figure out what's going to be displayed? Like, if you throw a dart on the wall and go, that, okay,
So
that's it.
It depends. It depends on what we're trying to show. Like I mentioned, this 1989 exhibit, we're doing that because it's the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall coming up
I'm
next
old.
year.
25 years?
Yeah, 25 years.
Are you going to be playing Scorpions' Winds of Change over and over again when you walk in? It has the whistling.
Yeah.
No? Just a suggestion.
Maybe. I'll note it down right now. But one other thing, like next summer, we're having a 100th anniversary of the start of the World War I, which is next July. So that's just one way we decide what to do. Like, is it tied to an anniversary? Is it tied to something like that? But in general, like when I select items, I want it to be a good, interesting mix, because we also have a pretty general audience that comes. Of course, there's some people that come and they read every caption and they look at every item. But to appeal to a general audience, we want to make sure that the items that we have are visually appealing. So definitely posters are very popular, photographs, artwork if we have it. Interesting books. There's all kinds of art books that we have. Speaking of Russia, there was this huge art movement in printing in the early 20th century in Russia in the late 19th century. And we have probably several hundred examples of just really beautiful art books that were printed in Russia. So that's just one small example of what we have. But we have materials from all over the world. So we've done different exhibits on different themes. We've done it on Iran. We've done it on South American countries. We've done it on Europe, America, World War I, World War II, basically everything that falls under our mission statement, our mission, our overall scope, which is war, revolution, and peace in the 20th century.
Oh, wow. Now, I'll tell you, I love going to museums, and I love reading the captions. I try to read the I'll walk into a room, and I'm like, oh, my God, there's so many captions in here that I have to read. And then I start to... After about the fifth caption, I start to get a little sleepy. And then there's, sometimes a nice bench right there, and I'll sit down and I'll kind of want to. So my question is, are there any coffee places close by that I can get a nice caffeine jolt before I come in?
Yeah, there's a place called Coupa Cafe, Coupa, and there's, that's my favorite. You should get the spicy Maya mocha. I get that one often.
Hey, do they have one of those? Is that a franchise?
Yeah, but they only have 5 locations, but one is in Beverly Hills of all places.
Do they have one in Mill Valley?
Maybe they do. I don't know. I know they have 3 locations at Stanford and one in downtown Palo Alto.
We got off on a coffee tangent there, but because I think I've had that spicy Mexican mocha. Maya. They don't say, okay, it's Maya mocha. Sorry. They put the cinnamon in there and stuff, and it's just awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so I might have one of those before I go. Or I just might be so riveted, Nick, by the captions that I'll be getting a adrenaline surge.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's an important detail, actually, because you don't want to overwhelm people with information. And part of my job, too, is to write these captions, to actually cut them, to mount them, all this little detailed work. And you don't want to overwhelm people with information. The whole idea that we go for is to inform people and maybe just spark their imagination with one particular item or two that they're really drawn to. So we don't expect every person who walks in the door to look at every item in the exhibit, but everyone seems to always gravitate towards particular items that interest them. So that's what we're all about. That's I think my job is done when people leave there learning, at least one new thing.
And how do you come up with the font for the captions?
I can't remember. I think I just used Arial Black or something like that. But it's got to be a readable font. No, you're right about that. It has to be, I believe it's a 14-point we use for the text. And I'd love to do it bigger, but that's the challenge. The bigger the text, the more space it takes up, and it just becomes a big challenge if you have these huge captions.
Right.
So you want to get the information across. But you don't want to overwhelm people with too much information so that their eyes glaze over.
Yeah. Oh, I just remember the good old days when you'd go to a museum and everything was typed on an old typewriter, and You'd see little whiteout marks and stuff, and
Yeah, I've looked into our records because it goes back, decades that we've had exhibits, and some of the old school captions are still there where that was typed on a typewriter, and they actually put up posters and things like that with thumbtacks, and now we have this whole, preservation department, and things are encapsulated, and it's a whole different ball game. But yeah, there's a lot of details that goes into it. And beyond captions, we also have to deal with how the materials are supported. Since they're going to be out there for 4 or 5 months, maybe longer if the exhibit runs longer. So we have to make sure that the temperature and humidity are kept the right way, that we don't have light coming in from any weird places.
Right.
That things aren't like too much pressure isn't being put on the spine of a book that could damage it. So all these different things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been to museums where everything has to be completely climate controlled, or because they're hundreds and hundreds of years old and they might just wither away.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's all that attention to detail.
I'll tell you one funny little story. I was in France. It must have been like 15 years ago, and I was at the Louvre Museum, the famous museum there, and I was looking at this like Renaissance tapestry or painting or something like that, and I was with my dad, and I had my program or whatever it was, a little guide to the museum, like kind of wrapped up, and I pointed to part of the painting when I was with him, and I ended up whacking the painting accidentally. And I don't think anybody saw it, but I didn't do any damage to it that I saw. But I remember it kind of like wobbling around. So you have to be careful. The nice thing about our museum that things are behind glass or plexiglass. But yeah, at other museums it's just out in the open. So I didn't mean to do it.
You put a hole in the Mona Lisa. Oh no. Yeah, have you been to the Getty Museum down in Los Angeles?
I haven't.
You'd enjoy that. Yeah, because they got a lot of old stuff there, and just so much is behind glass. And what I wanted to ask you though is, so you were talking about Russia. Have you been to Russia?
I haven't been to Russia. I'd love to go. I'd love to see St. Petersburg, especially in Moscow. It's in my bucket list to go and to also learn Russian, but it's a challenge, of course, to learn it. But I think since I do know Polish already, so I think the Russian will come easier.
And you go to Poland quite a bit.
Yeah, I've started to travel there more. I'm working on my PhD in history, and it's a place where I go to do research, and it's also my heritage too. I'm first generation American, born here in California, but both my parents are from Poland, all my ancestors, so it's still a very near and dear to my heart. So I was there for a month in September. I was there for 6 months almost last year. So it's grown on me, and hopefully I'll go back next spring.
And what city do you go to?
Warsaw is where I spend the most time. It's the capital city. It's almost 2 million people there, and it's where my mom is from. My dad is from Poznań, which is in the west of Poland, but Warsaw is kind of in the central part, and that's the capital. So that's the biggest city in Poland. It's my favorite city because there's the most going on. There's the most people, and so that's usually where I go.
And is there a particular spot you like to go to every time you go, like maybe a landmark or something?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of interesting history in Warsaw. I mean, the city itself has a very dramatic history, especially in the 20th century. It was totally destroyed towards the end of World War II. But there are many beautiful parts of the city, even though some people have the opinion that it's kind of ugly and, too much... gray buildings and all of that, and that's kind of a legacy of communism. But I think one of my favorite places is called the Łazienki Park, which is kind of the royal park where the king had his summer home. It has a beautiful lake and trees. It's kind of like the Central Park of Warsaw.
Oh, neat. The Łazienki Park.
That's right. Pretty close.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be able to talk to anybody there. I can't quite read their language.
Yeah, although I found a lot of people that speak English pretty well, especially the younger generation, since now it's part of school. They learn it from a young age, whereas 25 years ago it was still Russian was the second language they were learning.
No, I would think it'd be fascinating to see Warsaw. I mean, you're right. Just the tremendous history it's had.
Yeah. And it's like a less discovered part of Europe. I think a lot more people, especially from Europe, Western Europe, have visited Warsaw in the last 20 years because of the cheaper flights, and it's become, a much more prosperous place. One other city that I really love in Poland is called Krakow, and that's in the south. That's the historic capital of Poland. Not the capital anymore, though, but that's where you have the old castle where all the Polish kings are buried. The Wawel Castle is what it's called. So that place is probably the most beautiful city in Poland as far as architecture and history and all of that.
And what's something in Poland that you love to eat whenever you go there?
Pierogi, and you guys have probably heard that somewhere, but pierogi are kind of these doughy things with some kind of a filling. So you can have, a potato filling, a cheese filling, a meat filling, but my favorite pierogis are the ones with blueberries in them.
Ooh, yum! And they grow their blueberries there, huh? They can grow blueberries.
I'm not sure. They might import their blueberry
from California.
Yeah,
wouldn't that be ironic? Just like they're importing you when you come over there to do your research.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
How about drinks?
My favorite is called, and I think you had some, the vodka żołądkowa. Żołądek is stomach, so it has something to do with like calming the stomach. Oh. But it's this kind of orange, sweet flavored vodka that's infused with herbs. So I really like it. You can just drink it with on the rocks or cold, straight, or mix it with a drink. And vodka actually is, from what I've heard, it's the oldest reference to vodka was in Polish. So as far as where it was ultimately created, the history of it, whether it was Russia or Poland, based on the documents, it's Poland. It might have been Russia, but who knows? I'd say it's from Poland.
I did, yeah. That vodka that I had when I was with you, that was so good.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing some of that.
Sure. And alcohol, too, just in general, is a lot cheaper there. Of course, when you have imported stuff, it's expensive, but you can get like a shot of vodka there for the equivalent of it's like 50 cents.
Huh. Wow.
Depends on the place, but 50 cents for $1.
So many reasons to go to Poland. Wow. Well, Nick, thanks for chatting with us here at Mike's Daily Podcast. Actually, we're just chatting with me. Although Basil the Boxer was listening. He's on his couch there, sleeping away. But fascinating talking to you. And we'll have to do it again soon.
Thank you for having me on.
And maybe when this exhibit comes up in February about the World War II... I'm sorry, the
1989?
Belgian... Berlin Wall coming down.
Yeah.
Winds of Change, Scorpions.
Sure.
We should talk about that when we get around to that time.
Sounds good. And just let me throw out the website one more time. My website is researchteacher.com, and I'm also on Twitter at researchteacher.
Researchteacher. Researchteacher.com, and he's on C-SPAN.
Yeah. The episode of Lou Henry Hoover. So if you check out First Lady's C-SPAN, and you can watch the episode on Lou Henry Hoover. If you watch just the segment on her at Stanford, then I'm in that for like a couple minutes, so it's pretty cool.
That is, and I want to go to this exhibit, the latest one that has to do with the Vladimirov.
Yeah, so let me just mention that. That is up until December 20th of this year, so there's 5.5 weeks left. And like I said, Tuesday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m.
I'm totally going before you close that exhibit.
Let me know, and I'll show you around.
Woo!
So, yeah.
I'm your private curator, a curator for money. Show you what I want you to see. No. All right, Nick, thank you so much for being on Mike's Daily Podcast. Nick Siekierski.
Thank you, Mike.
As we go outside of the last place on earth where we bring you Mike's Daily Podcast, somewhere in Podcastro Valley, California.
And here's today's podcast picture.
And the picture's not from California, but from Florida. Orlando. On my recent trip to see my mom in Daytona Beach, we took an hour drive south down to Orlando to downtown Disney, which is free. Parking's free. The only thing that costs is, well, eating, which is way overpriced anywhere you go. But we were walking around, my mom and I, and all of a sudden we come upon the Lego store, and they've got this big Lego sea serpent coming out of the water there. It's right on this little lake. There's just water everywhere in Florida. So this thing is made out of Legos, and it's coming out of the water, and it just looked cool. So you can see a picture of that at MikeStellyPodcast.com. And that is the Rainforest Cafe, which is shaped like a volcano there in the background. And you can see it was a very nice day. Going to Florida in October is nice. It's not as humid, not as many tourists either.
That's good to know, Mike Matthew. Are there a lot of people with tattoos?
What is the deal with you and tattoos? Miley Cyrus should not be that kind of influence on you. You realize everything she's doing right now is an extreme. She's being herself to the extreme so that she can get publicity for the album. She knows this is her one chance, and so she's got the eye of the world on her, and so she's going to keep the eye on her by doing all these crazy things.
Yeah, whatever, Mike Matthews.
What do you mean, whatever?
You're old. You don't know what you're talking about.
I am almost 45. That's true. We're just 9 days away from my birthday. Ugh. Please stop applauding that. 45. Jeez.
So old, Mike Matthew.
Yeah. Mike, you're just a youngin'. You know, I'm really sad to see Blockbuster go away. You are? Even though, like, they overcharged? Oh, $50 once for a late DVD. This was not that long ago. It's so funny to see Blockbuster bite the dust. And 2008 is when this happened. My wife at the time had forgotten about a movie we had watched, and it was sitting in the back seat of her car. Next thing you know, she was cleaning her car out one day, like 3 weeks or so after it was due, and we owed like $50. It was ridiculous. And you know, that's the whole reason why Blockbuster was in business. All these late fees. I know my mom, when she owned a video store, she got all these people who owed her late fees, and it helped her out. Except getting the video sometimes was a bit scary. My mom should write a book, because she would go get the movies herself. The people, the deadbeats that I just called myself a deadbeat because I was also late with the movie, but some people were really late with movies. And she would finally, when it was just completely ridiculous, knowing she'd probably never get the money from these people because they owed so much, she would go to their house, knock on the door, and go, excuse me, just give me back my movie. And they'd be like, embarrassed. She never got into any problems. No threats or anything. They would just be like, oh, sorry, Mrs. Matthews, and get the movie. And the movie would be there. So, an interesting story, isn't it? No? All right, whatever. Tomorrow we'll bring you the segment Fabagoo Things to Do with the owner of Fabagoo.com, Steve Hansen. He will tell us all the fun things to do this weekend from his website, Fabagoo.com. That's got all the events, anything you want to do any day of the week. All the events that you can do are right there at his website, Fabagoo.com. Plus, we'll hear from Benita the Disgruntled Fiddle Player and the Brewmaster.
That was the last country cassette that was ever made, Billy Ray Cyrus's album.
Yeah. So, 60 Minutes apologized at the end of their recent episode because of the whole Benghazi thing. That guy lied about saying that he was actually someone that was there at Benghazi when the whole thing went down. So I would like to apologize. Last night or yesterday's podcast, I talked about how I was mad at The Daily Show for poking fun at Chris Christie's weight, and I hadn't really watched the episode all the way through, I'll admit. I did see, though, their post on Facebook, and their Facebook post was a slam against Chris Christie's weight. But when I actually saw the episode, it turned out that they were making fun of people who make fun of Chris Christie's weight, much as I was trying to do. So my apologies to The Daily Show. I'm sure they don't even listen to this, but hey, sorry about that. You guys are funny. And I laughed my tuchus off watching the Monday Show was what I was watching. So thank you, Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, for making me laugh. Thank you, Aziz Ansari, for making me laugh. Thank you, Blockbuster, for closing your damn doors, you shysters.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com.
Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com.
See you tomorrow. Bye!